Good afternoon. Welcome to Recovering Perfectionist Mama, Grace in Progress. My name is Buffy. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. Happy to have you. I'm a women's lifestyle creator on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, covering topics that concern women. If you're a returning viewer, also welcome. Happy to have you. It seems that we have something of a community here, so everyone is welcome. We do a lot of relational topics and other topics. If there's a topic that you're interested in, feel free to drop it in the community. We do have a very warm, welcoming community, and you're welcome here. So thank you for tuning in. Today, we're doing a 3-part series, The.Secret, Perfectionism of No Contact, why you still feel guilty, and how to find your peace. No one really talks about what happens after you go no contact. Everyone expects relief, freedom, peace. But what many people feel instead is guilt. And not the healthy kind of guilt, the kind that makes you wonder if you're somehow doing healing wrong. Act 1, the unexpected aftermath. Most people think no contact is the finish line, but for recovering perfectionists, it's often just the beginning of a quieter, more confusing phase. Let's talk about how shocking it is to experience the internal discomfort after an external boundary. It can feel like you're doing something wrong, like you're letting people down, like you're not doing what you were taught to do as a child. You know what I mean? Forgive and all of that. Can feel like you're doing the opposite of what you should be doing. Because ultimately, you're in this situation where family hasn't really been family to you, which forced you to make a decision as to how you're going to proceed. Are you going to continue to keep quiet and to endure things that disrespect you and hurt you deeply just to keep the peace? Or are you going to say, I've had enough. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep being mistreated. I can't keep bringing my children somewhere where I don't feel that it's emotionally safe for them or for me. And ultimately, when you have little eyes looking at you, that's when you know that it's more than just about you, right? You have little ones watching, and you want your little ones to know that enduring abuse or enduring mistreatment is not what you would want them to do. And then the other thing that's interesting too is you have this absence of chaos that just feels strangely unsafe. Because ultimately, it's almost like you became used to or accustomed to having the mistreatment, being treated poorly, being insulted, being ganged up on, all of those things. Because it had happened potentially for quite a while. Maybe it happened through your childhood. Maybe it happened, as long as you can remember. And so ultimately, because sometimes we think that we need to endure this because we love these people, the people that are hurting us. But love shouldn't hurt. Love should be patient. Love should be kind. Love shouldn't seek its own way. And honestly, if someone were to tell you, you know how much I love you. You know how you know how much I love you? Because I only hurt those that I love. You would look at that person and you would say, that is a pretty screwed up way of showing someone that you love them by mistreating them. And that is not something that is okay. That is called dysfunctional. That is called abuse. And that is not something that I am willing to tolerate. And then there's the moment where people think, I did all this inner work. I made up my mind. I knew what I was going to do. But then you think, why don't I feel better yet? Why do I potentially feel worse? And sometimes it's kind of like when you have this painful injury, like let's say you have a deep cut on your arm or somewhere, and you have to rip off the Band-Aid, or you have to get the stitches removed, or you have any number of things that you have to do that's painful. Sometimes it feels worse before it feels better. And sometimes we just have to get through the hard phase first before things start getting easier. And I know that that's really not a great explanation. I know I've been there before myself, just trying to push through. And, as they say, the only way out is through. Every storm runs out of rain. I know I've said that before. Trying to kind of get myself hyped up and ready and knowing that it's not going to be this way forever. Things are going to ultimately settle. You're going to feel better. But also, you are in the driver's seat. You have the ability to decide how you want to go with this. When perfectionism rebrands itself, here's what no one warns you about. Perfectionism doesn't disappear when you set boundaries. It just changes costumes. There's the idea that you want to have perfect forgiveness, right? As a person who is a perfectionist, you want to do things perfectly. You want to do things right. You want to do things above board. And so the idea that there is this perfect forgiveness, right? But ultimately, when humans are involved, nothing is perfect. Nothing. Even though your intention is to make a clean start, maybe that's what your idea is by the perfect forgiveness. Things rarely happen that way. Someone could hold a grudge. Someone could be, I'm not willing to even look into that. I just want to go my separate ways, Hurt people hurt other people. And hurt people also get very, very spiteful sometimes, especially if they feel like you owe them something. Perfect emotional neutrality. Again, nothing about human relationships is ever perfect. We all come from our own paradigm. We all come from our own viewpoints. We all have our own quirks. We all have our own idiosyncrasies, and we all bring some baggage to the table. I know I've said this before. I've used this analogy a lot. We're all just little children, like rolling our little rolly backpacks full of hurt. And for those of you that have been the subject of verbal abuse, mental abuse, things like that, being ostracized by your family who were given the assignment to love you, yours might be heavy, and that's okay. Because ultimately, when people are hurt, they experience pain. When people are cut, they experience pain. When they feel betrayed, I will say I think that betrayal is one of the hardest feelings to overcome. I remember when I lost one of my friends who had been friends with me for over 15 years, and some of the nasty, mean things that she said to me literally had me feeling physical pain because the betrayal was so deep and so sharp. And if you've experienced that, you know that it is a real thing and it is extremely painful. And it's like, once you experience something like that, it's like this is just another thing that I don't want to. And then the other thing to be really careful on is the perfect healing timeline. As we've talked about in the past, healing is not linear, right? You're going to have days where you wake up and you're like, oh, I feel great. I'm ready to go. And then you have other days where you're like, I feel like I just experienced this all over again, or all of these old feelings are coming back to me again. And that is perfectly normal. Not fun, but normal. Suddenly, even your boundary has to be executed flawlessly. And you know what? That is essentially something that you're trying to do right, because you know what it's like to not be treated the way you should be treated. You want to make sure that you're doing things correctly or perfectly. But guess what? No one does everything perfectly, and that's okay. You do the best you can with what you have, and you can move forward if that's what you decide to do. As I've said throughout our series on this, I've said that I am not going to be in the place where I'm going to tell you do X, Y, Z. Because guess what? Each situation is unique. You're a unique individual. You have unique preferences. I don't know your full situation, so why would I weigh in and tell you, like, give you a blueprint or anything like that? Because ultimately each situation is individual, and each person has their own point where they're like, look, I'm done. Let's talk about Act 3, why guilt lingers even when you're right. There is something called conditioning versus conscience. Conditioning, as you know, similar to when you're beginning a workout regimen, you start conditioning, right? Conditioning your muscles to work the way that they're supposed to. Similarly, people who tend to come from toxic families may have experienced conditioning. Conditioning that you don't realize that you're actually getting until you remove the source of the conditioning versus your conscience. Conditioning is something that has been fed to you probably since you were little, if you've experienced it. And it's something that is kind of the whole family's way of kind of keeping you in line. Now, a lot of people, rather than saying conditioning, might call it manipulation. And I've had scenarios where I didn't realize that I had been conditioned or manipulated in certain ways until I got away from that situation. And when I got away from that situation, I started seeing things that I had never seen before. It's almost like, and I'm not making light of this, please don't think that I am. It's almost like the whole Jim Jones situation, right? The church leader that came from Indianapolis, the People's Temple, and then ended up taking his people to Guyana, which clearly the reason he took them to Guyana is so that he could have them isolated, so that they could not get away from him and his conditioning and the things like that. And it ultimately ended tragically, if you know the story. And so the other thing is, when you are a scapegoat, you were trained to manage other people's emotions subtly. And how that happened is, I would say generally it happens to people who are very empathetic and conscientious about other people. And so they are naturally good at that. And so they learn footsteps, they learn tone, they potentially are parentified to be able to provide comfort to adults and other people because they're just good at that and they take it on. And I used to have a massive issue with that, like the entanglement kind of thing, because as an empath myself, I generally have feelings that other people are experiencing sometimes. And so that can leave me wide open for all sorts of feelings and wanting to help other people. And I have had moments with certain individuals where I have actually gotten very, very upset when they were upset, kind of like entanglement, which again is part of conditioning. And then the conscience, if you're a person who believes in the golden rule and you want to treat people the way that you want to be treated, and you are a conscientious person and you genuinely love other people, your conscience isn't going to let you just obliterate someone, nor should anyone want to obliterate someone, unless in certain situations, like extreme situations, right? The other thing is, peace feels wrong when chaos was familiar. And it's almost like you are comfortable with chaos because that is how you survived. You know the playbook of chaos. But peace, just almost feels like too quiet. And that's generally the scenario where you're pushing people away because you're like, this person isn't going to stay. Like, this person is like, I just don't feel comfortable with safe. And for the longest time, I'll be honest, like in my dating history, I dated wounded birds. I dated guys who told me that, my mom didn't feed me dessert, and, and I just, it was this and this and this and this and this, and then you start feeling bad for them. And then you realize, like, it's just all a line, like it really is. And then you start thinking, like, when you finally meet someone who is whole, and I met someone who was whole, and he scared me because you know why? He didn't need me to fix him. He didn't need me to do the things that all the other wounded birds needed. Most likely probably because they were users, they were manipulators. And they knew that I was compassionate, and we fall into that. Sometimes the devil is more comfortable to you than something that might actually be better for you. And again, that goes to conditioning. That goes to you wanting to help people and be genuine and be loving and have love. Give love and receive love, right? By the grace of God, I literally got away from the wounded bird thing. I'm not talking about someone who has, maybe a minor thing. I'm talking about someone who intentionally plays up their issues to try to manipulate. And there are a lot of grifters out there, to be honest. If you were raised to believe your worth was tied to emotional labor, then choosing yourself will feel like betrayal, even when it's survival. You know what they say when you're on an airplane with your children? They always say, put your face mask on first before you help someone else. And if you're a person that's been like, I got to put my face mask on my kids first. But the thing is, if you're not strong enough to be able to put your face mask on first, how are you going to help your children? Which makes sense. But also, too, I kind of feel that pang, too, when I think about that. So let's talk about the final layer of letting go. You don't owe emotional closure unless it's something that you want to give. But is there a fear that you may potentially get pulled back in? Think about that if you haven't already. Healing doesn't require symmetry. Peace doesn't need permission. The guilt doesn't mean you chose wrong. It means you stopped disappearing. You finally are in the driver's seat. So in closing, if you're in the quiet after the exit and wondering why it still hurts, you're not broken. You just have a heart. And there's nothing wrong with having a heart. Sometimes things are painful because you have a heart. And you're considering the other person most likely more than they've considered you, unfortunately. And you're unlearning a lifetime of self-erasure. You matter. You are important. You're not imagining things. It hurts. And if it hurts, love doesn't hurt. It shouldn't hurt. It should feel peaceful and warm and inviting without pain. If this resonated, you're not alone, and you don't have to heal perfectly to heal honestly. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. This will be a 3-part series, so thanks again. And again, as I always say, thank you for tuning in to Recovering Perfectionist Mama, Grace in Progress. It means an awful lot to me. And I know I've said this before, but when I first started this podcast, I talked a lot about building a community for women. And here you all showed up. Thank you so much. And thank you for your thoughtful comments and your encouragement. It means a lot to me. And if there is an idea that you're looking into that you would like to know more about, please let me know. I am open to suggestions on ideas and such. And I hope you have a great rest of your day and a happy Sunday. Bye-bye.